Here's 40 shillings on the drum for those who volunteer to come to list and fight the foe today over the hills and far away.
The officers of Napoleon's army had commandeered the Ferme De Caillou farmhouse to serve as Napoleon headquarters on the eve of the battle. It was well appointed as a farmhouse, but nevertheless, they had most of the existing furniture moved out of the building, along with the farmer's family, so that the emperor's entourage could set it up for his use. It was there that Napoleon spent his last night before his empire crumbled for a second and final time. About 2 miles up the road to the north, the Duke of Wellington's multinational army bivouacked for the night. Not quite 3 miles behind them was the village of Waterloo. Napoleon dined alone that evening of 17th June 1815 in a room in the farmhouse of Le Caillou. In an adjoining room, another table had been set up for his aide-de-camp and his several high-ranking officers, among them Colonel Combeferre, the 6th Corps Chief of Staff. During the officers' dinner, one of them spoke in a loud voice about the battle awaiting them on the morrow. Upon hearing him, Napoleon burst into the room and took a few paces with his hands behind his back. Then, without turning around, addressing no one in particular, he exclaimed, "A battle, gentlemen! Are you sure you know what a battle is? Between a battle won and a battle lost, there are empires, kingdoms, the world, or nothing." In the 205 years since the Battle of Waterloo, the farmhouse of Le Caillou has been owned by different families. But sightings of Napoleon's ghost in the farmhouse are frequent. One previous owner's wife claimed she saw Napoleon looking out through a window of the room he had stayed in the night before the battle, only for this figure to slowly fade away. Many others have also reported feeling Napoleon's presence while staying at the farmhouse, and felt as if they were being watched by him, or even followed. However, it is not just the previous owner of the farmhouse who have encountered his presence. He has also been felt by many of the tourist battlefields who have visited the Museum of Ferme De Caillou, saying they have seen small gentlemen looking like Napoleon sitting and overlooking a table surrounded by fellow French officers in one of the upstairs rooms. Maybe he is in a meeting and planning his action on Wellington's forces for the following day. Those who have reported seeing this sighting of Napoleon with fellow officers have all said that during that moment the door to the room was slammed shut in their faces with a big bang. A member of the museum staff heard the knock on her office door late one evening, just before closing for the day. But upon opening the door to answer it, there was nobody there. But when she turned around, the ghost of Napoleon was standing there, staring at her, only to fade away, with sounds of cannon fire being heard from outside moments later. The most commonly repeated of all the stories of Le Caillou are the sounds of the footsteps of Napoleon himself. The clump of his heavy riding boots can be heard pacing back and forth across the room where he slept the night before the battle. Visitors and staff have heard this noise countless times. Some have gone to investigate, but have found no one within the room. Others who have stayed at the farm have commented on being taken in by the sound of soldiers marching outside the farmhouse in the rain. Combined with the noise of pacing up and down in the next room, could this be the echoes of the eve of battle in 1815?
King George commands and we obey, over the hills and far away. Here's 40 shillings on the drum, for those who volunteer to come, to list and fight the foe today, over the hills and far away.
On the morning of the 18th of June 1815, the Scots Greys cavalry found themselves in the third line of Wellington's army on the left flank. As the fighting around La Haye-Saint and Hougoumont developed, Wellington's cavalry commander, the Earl of Uxbridge, held the cavalry back. However, with the French infantry advancing and threatening to break the British centre, Uxbridge ordered the Household Brigade and the Union Brigades to attack the French infantry of Derlancourt. The Scots Greys, under Lieutenant Colonel Hamilton, were initially ordered to remain in reserve as the other two brigades attacked and the rest of the British heavy cavalry advanced against French infantry. But just after this, Hamilton witnessed the 92nd Highlanders infantry falling back in disorder, so on his own initiative, Hamilton ordered his regiment of cavalry forward at the walk. Because the ground was broken and uneven due to the mud, the crops, the scattering men of the 92nd, the Scots Greys picked their way through and remained at the walk until they passed through the Highlanders. The arrival of the Scots Greys helped rally the 92nd, who turned back to attack the French again. Even without attacking at full gallop, the weight of the Scots Greys' charge proved too much for the French column to withstand. As the Scots Greys waded through the Frenchmen, Sergeant Charles Ewart found himself within sight of the eagle of the French 45th Regiment, Delon, the 45th Regiment of the Line. Grasping his chance to capture the eagle, Ewart fought his way towards it, later recounting, "One made a thrust at my groin. I parried it off and cut him through the head. One of their lancers threw his lance at me, but missed. By my throwing it off with my sword, I cut him through the chin and upwards through the teeth. Next, I was attacked by a foot soldier who, after firing at me, charged me with his bayonet, but I parried it and cut him down through the head." With the eagle then captured, Sergeant Ewart was ordered to take the trophy off the battlefield, denying the French troops a chance to recapture their battle standard. Everyone who has visited the battlefield of Waterloo will have wanted to know where the famous charge of the Scots Greys took place, as seen in the famous painting by Lady Elizabeth Butler, Scotland Forever. Many visitors who have visited during the hot summer months have witnessed what looks like a dust cloud moving across the open fields. They hear the sounds of neighing horses, cannon fire lasting for 5 minutes or more. You might believe a farmer were working the land, but upon hearing the last of the cannons fired, the dust suddenly lifts, only to reveal silent, empty fields. No farmers, no equipment, no cause of the mysterious clouds of dust. Is this the charge of the Scots Greys heading for the French line to take the Imperial Eagle from Napoleon's soldiers? Now, Lieutenant Colonel Hamilton was not lucky enough to survive the battle. Around the area in which his body lay dead on the field that day, a white lady has since been reported wandering the fields of Waterloo. Could this white lady be his wife, Mary Inglis Payne? During the battle, Lieutenant Colonel Hamilton, commanding the Royal Scots Greys, was leading his famous charge on horseback when he lost his left arm. So, he simply put the reins in his mouth and continued the charge, even after his right arm was severed by a French lancer. Moments later, he was shot, fell, and killed. Later, after the battle had finished, he was found with a bullet wound through his heart, as well as many other injuries. And upon learning of his death, his wife was poorly compensated and received only £200. Sadly, she was not to inherit his wealth. She later died a pauper, crying out for her true love. Is this ghostly white figure Mary Inglis Payne, looking for her true love, her husband, so they can both rest in peace together in the afterlife?
O'er the hills and o'er the main, through Flanders, Portugal and Spain, King George commands and we obey. Over the hills and far away. Here's 40 shillings on the drum for those who volunteer to come to list and fight the foe today. Over the hills and far away.
Mont-Saint-Jean is located halfway between the edge of the escarpments and south of the village of Waterloo. The farm once served as a family farm for the surrounding lands, but for 4 days during and after the Battle of Waterloo, it was to become the major military field hospital, treating not only the British and Allied soldiers, but also injured French soldiers. When the battle erupted, surgeons were kept busy with their knives and saws in cottages and farms on both sides of the battlefield. Most of the wounded lay where they had fallen, but many were able to walk or had been carried off the field of battle to one of these places, overwhelming the medical facilities. One of these farms is Mont-Saint-Jean. It was thrown into the midst of chaos, providing shelter for the wounded and dying as a field hospital. Not surprisingly, the farm is said to still bear the marks of not only the physical effects of the battle, but the spiritual effects as well. It was during these terrible conditions at the farm, throughout the battle, and afterwards, that have left the strongest impressions on the buildings in the farm. According to records of the time, blood sprayed the walls and floors of the rooms located within the farm, as doctors operated without anaesthetic, dealing with musket, cannon, and many other injuries. Preferred treatment of the time, which was amputation. Outside the operating rooms was an area where those who could not be saved were left to die, with no one to care for them. They lay alongside piles of amputated body parts, piling high. The farm is said to be the dwelling place of many soldier-era ghosts. People, both staff and guests alike, can attest to strange going on here. So it comes as no surprise as it's been called one of the most haunted places on the battlefield of Waterloo in 1815. The farm is a grisly reminder of what it was, that it served as a bloody field hospital and treated nearly 6,000 soldiers over a 4-day period. Now, many have witnessed a young lady dressed in period clothing on different occasions at the farm, in some state of disarray. Sometimes you can hear her crying and even screaming, but not to be seen anywhere. Could this be the daughter of Gregory Buchan, the owner of the farm at the time of the Battle of Waterloo? It has been said that one of his daughters actually went insane during the exhumations, having lived through both the battle and its aftermath. Allegedly, she was to have seen blood flowing from the walls of the farmhouse, and she appears at the farm at different times of the day and night. People have asked the brewery staff who the young lady is, as they are concerned for her safety, only to be informed that it's only the ghost of one of Gregory Buchan's daughters, and it's normal to hear her around. Another story is on one evening, 2 members of the brewery staff experienced something most terrifying, more than anything else anybody has witnessed at Mont-Saint-Jean. Most have reported seeing the figures of surgeons and soldiers pacing back and forth in and outside the farm buildings, especially around the Great Barn itself. Now, this is now used for weddings and other such functions. But late one summer's evening, a few years back, something completely different happened. And on this particular night, 2 members of staff were walking around making sure things were closed after a wedding function. What they did, they opened the main door to the great barn where the functions are held, just to make sure that nobody was still in there. However, the 2 members of staff could scarcely believe their eyes. What should have been an empty space within the barn was replaced by her horrendous scene from the field hospital at the Battle of Waterloo. Dead and dying men were laying all around the floor. Blood-covered doctors and orderlies were rushing about chaotically, trying desperately to save lives. No sound emanated from this ghastly sight, but both members of staff saw it extremely clearly. Horrified, they frantically tried to close the doors, and as the doors closed, one of the orderlies looked up directly at them, appearing to see them with a pleading expression on his face. Now, since these gruesome experiences, both members of staff have never been the same again. And we now add this as another member, another victim, to add to the Battle of Waterloo.
O'er the hills and o'er the main, through Flanders, Portugal and Spain, King George commands and we obey. Over the hills and far away. Here's 40 shillings on the drum for those who volunteer to come to list and fight the foe today. Over the hills and far away.
This is a story of Irish soldiers. How they fought, how they died, and how the past can sometimes be closer than you think on the battlefield of Waterloo. In June 1815, the 1st Battalion of the 27th, or Inniskilling, Regiment of Foot, was comprised of some 747 officers and men. It was a battalion with a strong family tradition, recruited mainly in Ireland. In fact, the Inniskillings were the only Irish infantry battalion present at Waterloo. The battalion arrived onto the battlefield at around 11 o'clock in the morning on the 18th of June. It was part of the 6th Brigade, in reserve, under Major General Sir John Lambert. The Inniskillings had conducted a forced march from the Belgian city of Ghent, hurrying to reach the Duke of Wellington's main force at Waterloo. The Irish Redcoats reached the field tired and hungry. Their uniforms were still sodden from the torrential rain of the previous day. But their real ordeal at Waterloo was yet ahead. As the battle progressed, the battalion was ordered forward to defend a key point at the crossroads in the centre of Wellington's line. The Inniskillings took up their position, and the Inniskillings began to die. The battalion was forced to spend long periods in square because of the threat of enemy cavalry. Hemmed together, shoulder to shoulder, the Irish soldiers made an inviting target for French artillery and musketry. Round shots swept through their ranks, tearing away limbs and splintering musket stocks. Men dropped as they were hit, their comrades shoved tighter together by non-commissioned officers to fill the gaps. Close up! Close up! The wounded were dragged groaning and bloodied into the trampled crops at the centre of the square, there to die or to await proper medical attention once the fighting had subsided. With mounting casualties, it took extraordinary courage and the leadership of Major John Hare for the battalion to continue to stand its ground. As the late afternoon wore on, its position in the centre became more and more exposed, and at the same time more and more essential to the stability of Wellington's line. Had the Inniskillings broken, the entire line could have been breached, the road to Brussels opened, and the consequences disastrous. they did not break. An officer of the 95th Rifles would recall his shock as he gazed at the battalion's position that evening. The 27th Regiment, he remembered, were literally lying dead in square. Today, the site of the battalion's stand on the battlefield of Waterloo is marked by a memorial stele. The crops behind it sway gently in the summer breeze. In the background is the hum of traffic on the Brussels-Charleroi road. On a warm day, tourists relax and chat at the picnic benches near the monument. But just occasionally, visitors have reported other experiences that have left them unsettled and unsure. Snatches of Irish accents, bellowing orders and shouting encouragement, hoarse cries of pain, lost in the air the moment they're heard, the sudden, tearing crackle of a musket volley. These reports are infrequent, but there have been enough of them to attract attention. One man, shaking as he fled back to his car, would later describe a rumbling, rushing roar. He recalled it as shaking the ground, like an oncoming train. Could it be the hooves of French cavalry, spurring forward again towards the Inniskillings? Who can ever be sure? But one thing seems clear. Waterloo remembers.
Over the hills and far away. Here's 40 shillings on the drum for those who volunteer to come to list and fight the foe today. Over the hills and far away.
Chateau is a walled farm compound situated at the bottom of an escarpment close to the Nivelle Road near Waterloo, Belgium. The site served as one of the advanced defensible positions of the Anglo-Allied army under the Duke of Wellington that faced Napoleon's army at the Battle of Waterloo on the 18th of June 1815. The farm consists of a range of buildings, granaries, cowsheds, barns and two lesser houses for the farmhands. Behind the main house to the east there was a large formal garden enclosed by a 6-foot wall, and beyond that, to the south, lay an orchard. Looking beyond that, dense woodland, and then Napoleon's army. The first shots of the battle were fired by Napoleon's artillery at Chateau, which was followed by many bloody French attacks against the south and east walls and the orchard that lay just outside the farm. Wave after wave of brave French soldiers tried and failed to force their way into the farm through the south gates. They were picked off by the Allied soldiers firing down from the building, over the top of the walls and through loopholes that had been dug out by the Allied soldiers. The French bodies were piled high as they were not able to get over the walls into the farm. A path led from the clearing around the west wall of the chateau to another set of gates, the north side. While the fighting raged, Lieutenant Legros, an enormous man known as l'Enforcer, led a troop of his men up the path. They arrived outside the north gates just as they were being closed, having been left open for reinforcements and supplies coming down from Mont-Saint-Jean ridge. Legros used an axe to smash through the gates and into the inside courtyard. He was followed by approximately 30 men and one small boy, a French drummer boy, who slipped in just as Colonel MacDonald and his guards were closing the gates. Legros' force were trapped in the courtyard of the farm, and all were killed apart from the French drummer boy, who was spared. One of the first couples who stayed at the gamekeeper's cottage apartment at Hougoumont after it was restored and preserved for the long-term future in 2018 wrote in the visitor's log that his wife had seen an apparition of a red-coat soldier in the corridor and that he had smelled of gunpowder. They described themselves as level-headed and observed that the apparition did not appear threatening. There have been more recorded sightings of many ghostly redcoats wandering the grounds. Others who have visited Hougoumont over the years have reported a sighting of a small boy looking distressed and confused, but dressed in a Grande Armée uniform of Napoleon's army, and he stood just inside the north gates. Is this the spirit of the 12-year-old brave little drum boy who managed to get in the courtyard during the battle, whose life was spared? Many have reported approaching the distressed boy, only for him to suddenly disappear, leaving behind the strong smell of burning wood hanging in the air, and the temperature becoming very cold for a moment. Another reported sighting is said to be of Matthew Clay of the 3rd Regiment of Foot Guards, who fought at Hougoumont during the battle. His valour was outstanding during the day of the 18th of June 1815, and if he were alive today, many have stated he would have received the Victoria Cross for actions. They say a soldier never leaves the battlefield, and Matthew Clay is one of these. Many visitors have reported to staff at Hougoumont of seeing a soldier standing 5'7" or so, in a red tunic, carrying a musket with a bayonet attached. He is said to look hungry, his face blackened, and his eyes red from the effects of smoke from the battle. Many a visitor has commented how amazing it was to see reenactors during their visit to the farm. Some even comment on how this soldier has spoken to them about the attacking French soldiers, thus giving it a real connection to the Battle of Waterloo. Other visitors who have visited the farm have mentioned to the staff on site of the realistic battle sounds echoing, as if the battle were taking place in the distance. Only to be told by the staff at Hougoumont that they do not have any reenactors on site, or even any background battle noises playing. Is it Matthew Clay returning to the battlefield of Waterloo after his death? He died on the 5th of June 1873, aged 78 years, and was given a hero's funeral in the UK. Following his death, did he return to where he felt more at home? The battlefield. A true soldier's home.